Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who's very pumped up to talk about Trevor Lawrence. Maybe the rest of the AFC South, not so much, but still should be a fun show. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I just want to point out that we were here last week. We also aired on a Saturday last week. This is the last week of that, making sure you guys get a chance to enjoy your holiday tomorrow. But I just want to point out that last Saturday I was told I don't know hockey because I said Montreal had no chance, and turns out Canada still sucks, everyone. Sorry, Canadians.
Yes, this has been fun hockey, Kyle, for me. I think everyone else is very upset, and I'm just having a great time.
Hey, man, I mean, you're the best team that has no cap space that I've ever seen, so good for you.
Yes. Oh my God. If I have to listen to one more 18 million over the cap from someone who doesn't understand how any of that works, I won't mind it because at least I can know that I understand things and they don't.
I mean, I understand the ruling and why it works. Mm-hmm. I still think it sucks.
Sure, that's fine. But we're literally 2 million over the cap right now. But anyways, this discussion for another day. So you want to just jump right into the football?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. If this is your first division preview that you're catching in on, if you're just an AFC South fan, we'll go through it here real quick. Once again, I have ranked the divisions 1 through 8. I will give my ranking for this division, which is the AFC South this week. And then I'm going to go through and rank the teams from 4 all the way to number 1. And then Jackson here has his own almost football version of war that he's broken down for each of these position groups of each team. And he's going to go through each of these position groups to talk about what he likes, what he doesn't like, how he grades out these guys on tiers 1 through 5. And then that's basically how we break down the teams to see how we match up based on how I rate the teams, based on how he breaks down the players. So you get kind of an all-encompassing preview here.
Yes, that was very well set up, Kyle. You're getting good at this.
I know. I should get paid to do this.
Yeah, you get paid a little. Anyways, no,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All right. So number 4, as you said, you're going to start it off with who is number 4. This is a tough question here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough question. I think that there are some questions here about who is going to play on this team. We still don't really know. There's still no clear answer to that, which, by the way, so setting up the AFC South, I have this ranked as the 7th best division of football. If you can do the math, there's 8 teams in the 8 divisions in the NFL. So this is 7th of 8. That's because I think that there's 2 really strong teams in this division, but there's also 2 teams that aren't going to put up much of a fight, which kind of bring it down a little bit. So that's why it's 7th for me. And that's starting with the Houston Texans, who we're going to talk about one of these teams coming up, maybe one of the best constructed teams in football outside of Cleveland. And the Houston Texans are the complete opposite of that. This might be the worst constructed team in football. And just, the raw move after raw move that they made. I understand that they still potentially have Deshaun Watson. We don't know if he's going to play, but having Deshaun Watson isn't going to be enough to make up for a lot of this fault. So I think their ceiling might be 3rd because they have a great quarterback if he's able to play. But this team is easily looking like the worst roster in football outside of that position. So Houston Texans coming in at 4th.
Yeah, this is kind of an obvious one. I think the only question would be if you think that Deshaun Watson is playing. I do not have Watson playing. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's just what I'm basing this off of. If I'm wrong, that changes things, obviously. But so right now, to start things off with the 2 most important spots, head coach and quarterback, you have David Culley, who I give 30th in my head coaching rankings. He was the last of the new head coaches. So that's minus 7 wins right off the board. And then Tyrod Taylor as a starting quarterback. He's not an awful quarterback, but he's certainly not a great starting quarterback. It's a tier 5 quarterback room on top of a very poor head coach. So right off the bat, that's looking rough if there's no Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is I would say tier 1 quarterback when he's on, if Watson's on the field. Let's put it this way. I don't know, and I can't speculate on anything about this. I am willing to bet, though, that even if Watson does get on the field this season, it's not for 17 games. I don't think that happens. So we'll just leave it at that and put it that way. But yeah, I mean, Taylor is, I think I've talked about Taylor a few times. I'm like, I think he's nice. I think he does some things pretty well. He doesn't turn the ball over, but that's because he doesn't take a lot of chances. And I mean, Taylor's kind of known for just being replaced a bunch of times. So that kind of tells you what the rest of the NFL views about him.
Yeah, he's not an awful quarterback. He's just not one you build your team around. He's a high-quality backup. and it's a rough spot for them. And it doesn't get a lot better. I mean, going down the board, you're not going to find a lot of great stuff around it. First, the halfback room. They're building their team around halfbacks that you've heard of before. Maybe not necessarily guys that are still in their prime potentially. Over the hill halfback seems to be that's their logic here. You have David Johnson, Philip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, Rex Burkhead. Philip Lindsay probably the best out of this group, but this is a tier 4 running back room. They don't really have the one guy that you would want, and they have one of these guys is probably going to work out. They're probably going to get some quality here. You have Burkhead, who's he can catch and run as well, so there's that quality. But it's not something that I would consider to be a high quality running back room.
Yeah, it's almost like an island of misfit toys kind of thing with their running backs. I actually think, though, that they're going to be able to run the ball pretty well because I think they're going to be able to rotate these 3 guys in, and they're all going to be their normal solid self. It got rightfully completely criticized trading David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not going to say that that was the right move or anything like that. But you do look at it, Johnson had one of his better years basically since his best year since basically 2016, where he broke onto the scene. He only played 12 games, but he averaged almost 5 yards a carry in those 12 games. So, I mean, it's still not worth the price of DeAndre Hopkins, but, he can be a workable running back in this running back room. And we've seen Ingram and Lindsay also be the same thing, that they can, they can just work some yards. And I think that they'll be able to, with these 3 guys, figure out how to run the ball pretty well. I don't know if it's enough with this passing game.
It's one of those interesting things of how do you really evaluate going into the season situations like this, where there's a bunch of players who you could see doing well, but you don't know if there's question marks here. And it's like, will one of these guys still be good next year? Probably, but you just don't know. So that's where it's always tough to evaluate a situation like this.
Yeah, and if with Tyrod Taylor at the quarterback, who's taking this passing game seriously and not just selling out against the run, even though it's not fantastic running backs, why wouldn't you just sell out against the run if that's the quarterback option? Yeah,
and then you go to the receiving room. You have Brandon Cooks, who's good. Then you have Randall Cobb, who's fine. Randall Cobb, only 30 years old. I would have guessed at least like 47. I feel like he's been in the league for forever. You also have Kiki Cutie. You have Nico Collins, Chris Conley, but it's not. And for tight ends, they drafted Brevin Jordan, and you have Jordan Atkins, who's not much of a blocker, but he can pass catch. This is still a receiving room that's tier 4. And again, this goes back to every team is going to complain that their receiving room should be higher. If you look at the list, there's a lot of good receiving rooms. So this is tier 4.
Yeah, I almost think we need to almost post the list, because it's like you can say your receiving room's awesome, but at the end of the day, as I like Brandon Cooks' game, but at the same time, is Brandon Cooks a number 1 receiver? I'm not sure he is. He should be a number 1 receiver. He's probably a number 2 receiver who's been put in number 1 receiving positions basically his whole career. So it's interesting to see with this team. And yeah, I mean, there's just too many good receiving groups that, this isn't cutting it.
Yes. Also, I should say in the chat, appreciate the super chat. I'm not sure why you keep giving me super chats to tell me to cut my hair. I wonder if this is my grandfather who figured out how to super chat, and he's very upset about my hair.
Hey, it might be.
Yeah.
I think the hair looks good. It's very, you keep it clean. I like it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I grew it out during quarantine, and I'm like, I'm gonna just do this. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's not like you have to keep the hair standards on YouTube, so you're okay.
Right, exactly. Okay, where were we? Right. Any final thoughts on the receiving room, or should we move on to the O-line?
We can move on to the offensive line, which is sadly, their strength of their offense. So that they have an offensive line here. Go ahead and go into it.
Yeah, the offensive line is, it's a tier 3 offensive line. So this is their best part. It looks like they're going to move Titus Howard to guard. He did not have a great year last year. He did have a really good rookie year. So from what I understand, he's going to move to guard, which is interesting. Obviously, Laramie Tunsil is very good. And then they added Marcus Cannon, who I think will be fine. I think that, he was an opt-out last year. I think he could be maybe like a top 15 or above average right tackle, I would say. So you also have Max Sharping and Justin Britt, who's kind of been a consistent mediocre center to round out the interior. So it's tier 3. They have some stuff here that's solid. It's maybe not the most consistent, but it's not horrible either. It's probably the best part about this team.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is too. I like, Cannon was serviceable. Unfortunately, with just the way his contract was, I say we as I'm a Patriots fan. We had better options, basically, was the only issue, and more valuable options because of contracts. That was the only reason he didn't stick around, and that makes sense. Look, and, Laramie Tunsil, if you're doing it individually, Laramie Tunsil's probably a tier 1 left tackle. He's just playing with a bunch of, average to maybe solid other players on the offensive line. So it's a solid group overall with, one guy who's a standout player at the position.
Yeah, I agree. So their offense, 31st out of all 32 teams that I graded, only 1.96 wins for their offense. And you know what? It's the bright spot of this team.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, because this defense, I saw them in person one time last season, and also just having to watch them on TV a couple times as we were doing our shows throughout the year. Mm-hmm. It's a rough group. The coaching was bad on it. The players are bad on it. There's not a lot to look forward to with this defensive group.
Yeah, I mean, let's just jump into it. Bradley Roby, he's good. He's their star, or at least one of their stars. You also have the safeties aren't horrible with Justin Reed and Lonnie Johnson Jr. It's really that the rest of that secondary of Vernon Hargraves, who I can't believe is still getting starting time in the NFL. One of the worst. Again, when he played for Tampa, just not a good corner. He is the go-to example of be careful with drafting a slow corner because he doesn't have the speed. You also have John Reed, who was a 4th rounder in 2020 and didn't play much, only 145 snaps. And then you have Desmond King, the addition, who was great for his first 2 years of his career, but has, again, kind of been average the following 2. So maybe you hope that you can get that going. And then for the rest of for coverage unit and linebacker, you have Zach Cunningham, who I like. I know he led the league in missed tackles, but I think a good portion of that was just due to playing for the Texans. He was in a kind of a tough spot. You have Kevin Pierre-Louis, who's fine, and Christian Kirksey, who will probably be good for 3 games for them. This is the tier 5 coverage unit. It really comes down to the lack of. They don't have a ton of stars, and they have a key weakness with the depth in the corner position.
Yeah, I mean, Roby is out week 1 too, so that's another thing. I mean, it's only 1 game, but at the same time, you can basically chalk that up as a loss because they're not going to be able to cover anybody. I mean, so when you did these, I know you broke it into tiers, but did you rank them 1 to 32?
Yes. Yeah.
What did this coverage rank?
This was 28th, so it's actually the highest out of all the tier 5s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely near the bottom, and, when Roby's not in the game, it might be the bottom. So that's the problem I have with it. I mean, they're just I just saw so many games last season where this, there's just basic crossing routes that they were getting beat on because they weren't switching properly, or one guy switched and the other guy didn't switch, and it left a guy wide open on the sideline with nobody around him for 20 yards. So I just think it's sloppy. I think it's unorganized, and I don't think there's a lot of talented players.
Right, and that's the other thing too. It's got that rare combination of poor coach mixed with poor talent.
It must be a Texas thing because Cowboys are.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess maybe you're right. And it doesn't get much better when we're talking about just the front 7. I've already talked about the linebacking core. You have for your interior defensive lineman, you have Malik Collins, Ross Blacklock, who's known for being one of the key parts of the Deshaun Watson trade that has not worked out too well for Houston. You also have Charles O'Mayhew, who, again, we're not exact. These are replacement level players at this point. Maybe you hope Blacklock can take a step up. And for their edge, Whitney Merciless has definitely shown flashes, although Pro Football Focus actually graded him as the worst edge rusher in the league last year, which is a bit surprising. You also have Shaq Lawson, who's fine. And then, the linebackers that I just mentioned. I have this as graded as the 32nd run defense and 32nd pass rush in the NFL. Not a good front 7. This is tier 5 all across the board for defense, which means 0 points added for defense. 32nd in the NFL.
I mean, that's pretty much what you expect if, like, your premium name is Shaq Lawson, right? And don't get me wrong, I like Lawson, but I don't like him as your premium edge rush guy. There's just so many edge rush. It's almost like watching a basketball team with a bad point guard, and you're just like, how do you have a bad point guard in 2021 because there's so many point guards in basketball nowadays? How do you have a bad edge rusher in 2021 for the NFL? There are a billion edge rushers in the NFL right now. It just seems like weird that you can't find a couple, solid guys to be in that group. That's what's so weird about this team. Zach Cunningham is my favorite guy who is going to have like 130 tackles again this season, but it's because he's going to, be slow getting off the ball. And he's going to have like 130 tackles that average like 6 yards a game. I'm not I'm not a Cunningham guy at all.
Okay. I think he's okay. He's better in coverage than he is in the run defense. He can play fine in coverage, but I do agree. The run defense isn't where he shines.
Yeah, and then, Blacklock, I guess the one thing you have going for him is that it takes nose tackles, defensive tackles, maybe the longest. That in corner are probably the toughest. We've talked about this a couple times. Defensive tackle and nose tackle and corners, I think, are tough to adjust to at the NFL level. So maybe he starts to develop some things, but at the same time, I mean, it didn't look good. That's for sure.
Right. When you add on Kaimi Fairbairn for their kicker, he's a tier 4. So there you go. Some positive there. This is a team that, at the end of the day, 32nd in the NFL, according to my system, only 1.62 wins. Is that too much, Kyle?
1.62. I might bet the under on that one.
Yeah.
So
it's a rough team. I mean, listen, the one way this team could get better, you do have Davis Mills. Maybe he's like, I wasn't a big fan of him, but I've been wrong before. Maybe he works out. Maybe Deshaun Watson comes back. A tier 1 quarterback that's around like a 4-win team that could put him like a 5-win team. But it seems like it's a lot more difficult to really figure out how this team is good. I think the real thing you hope for if you're a Texans fan is you get the first overall pick. I think that's what you're hoping for from day one.
Yeah, you need like 5 first overall picks, though. You need the first 5 picks of next year's draft, basically. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation. I think this is, look, we've seen some of those old Cleveland teams and Detroit teams over the last couple of decades. I mean, this is right up there with it, with just how bad this roster is. At least you could look at the Jets here last year and say, hey, Marcus May is pretty nice. Like, you're looking at this team and say, hey, Laramie Tunsil and Brandon Cooks are your best 2 options. Like,
right.
I mean, if your best player is a left tackle, how far are you going?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough when you're the 3rd worst team in football and don't have a 1st or 2nd round pick. Like, we've never seen that before.
Yeah. Shout out to Bill O'Brien one more time.
Yeah, but I say the one time we kind of did see that was when the Texans didn't have the 4th overall pick, when they were 4th worst in the NFL and didn't have that pick. But at least then they traded for Deshaun Watson. They had kind of that asset. Now they don't even have this. This is a mess.
Yeah. So tough situation for the Texans. We can move on to number 3 now. This is another one that feels fairly obvious. The bottom 2, you felt like it was pretty clear cut. Jacksonville Jaguars, I think they're heading in the right direction. It's just going to take a while to get there, especially with the top of this division being as competitive as it is. I have said this multiple times on this podcast this offseason. I'm looking forward to watch this offense. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a exciting NFL Sunday ticket team, but a bad football team. I don't think they're going to win a ton of games this season, but I think they're going to be fun to watch lose a lot of games. So I'm going to enjoy watching this experience, but I think that they're at least 1 or 2 years away still from building this roster to being competitive. I just think the offense is going to be really fun. So the Jaguars are coming in here at number 3.
Yeah, you could see this being similar to like a Cincinnati Bengals last year of a team that, you don't necessarily look at them saying, are they going to make the playoffs? It's more so just how are they going to play? And of course, it all starts with Trevor Lawrence, who was 25th on my quarterback rankings, which is tier 4. But again, keep in mind, he's a rookie, and rookies tend to take a little bit to develop. A tier 4 for a rookie quarterback is actually still pretty good. And also keep in mind with Urban Meyer, the head coach, he was 28th, but that's largely just because I had basically every first-year head coach way down below the list because there's a big wild cards factor there. So if you think that he's going to be like league average, that might be half a win right there. But that's where those 2 guys are at.
Yeah, and if Lawrence has this year similar to like, Joe Burrow before the injury, or even gets up to the Justin Herbert numbers by the end of the season, then all of a sudden you're looking at a tier 3, tier 2 quarterback with a pretty good offense around him. So there's potential that this rises a lot, but also, like you said, when we did our quarterback rankings and coaching rankings, we're very conservative with first and second year head coaches. We're very conservative with first and second year quarterbacks. So it's fair for now, but obviously we realize that the potential is there that he's going to be good quickly.
Yeah, and there's where you can get a couple of wins right there if those things do jump up. Also, for the running back room, they obviously drafted Travis Etienne in the first round. They still have James Robinson. They also have Carlos Hyde and Dare Ngumbawale. So there's guys here and some top guys. So it's a tier 2 running back room. I'm not sure if they have the elite, Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey guy. Maybe Etienne can become that, but again, he is a rookie. We haven't seen that yet at the NFL level, but tier 2, still a good running back room.
Yeah. By the way, I have to give you a little bit of trouble for this because as I watched a lot of Wisconsin football, it's Dare Agumbawale. Didn't he play for the Buccaneers too?
He did. What did I say? I thought I got the last name right.
You said Dare though.
I did say that. That was it's spelled like there. My bad. I was focused on the last name and I missed the easier part.
Yeah. Well, so I do like this running back room a lot. Tier 2 seems fitting because there's a lot of elite guys for tier 1. Here's the thing that it just continues to baffle me with this Travis Etienne pick. I get it that it's a multi-running back league now. You can do Etienne's talented enough that you can use him a lot of different ways, including, you can even run him in a slot every now and then because he is a good catcher. Isn't this a tier 2 running back room if Travis Etienne's not on this team though?
Probably. Maybe it's tier 3, but that's not a huge jump win-wise. That's only they might use a different system than what I use, obviously. So that's where something different happens. But yeah, I don't understand it either. I think what happened was they wanted Kadarius Toney, which is what they said. And then once Toney got taken off the board, they just scrambled and didn't really know exactly what to do. And so went with Etienne.
That's fair. Yeah, there's a very real possibility, and I think Etienne is very versatile, that he can still have a major impact on this team. I really like James Robinson. We talked about it all last season that, he was a bright spot for a struggling Jaguars team that, lost 14, 15 games in a row last season. So
yeah, 15.
Yeah, he was very good last season, and I think he's going to be really good. And now they have the depth around him that they don't have to workhorse him.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, so the Jaguars have lost 15 straight. If they lose the next 11, they would tie the record for most losses in a row. Could they take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers record? They better not. That's our record.
I don't think they're going to lose 15 games in a row, but that'd be crazy if they're able to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing that the Cleveland Browns didn't break that when they went 1-31. They managed to win at the right time there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they had that going for them, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. They only won one game, but picked the spot well. Wide receivers not finish off the offense, but get one step closer to finishing off the offense. This is a tier 4 wide receiving room. You have DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault. So they have 3 good options. You also do have Philip Dorsett as well. So you have, guys who can play, 3 guys in particular who can play. I'm not sure if anyone's like a true number 1 option. DJ Chark has shown flashes of that, but I still think his route running needs to improve for him to be that number 1 guy. Also for tight ends, you have Chris Manhertz, who's mostly a blocker. And then you have James O'Shaughnessy, who's sort of, fine at everything, not great at anything. So it's tier 4.
Yeah, that seems fitting. I even like Philip Dorsett as the 4th guy. It stinks that they don't really have a tight end option, but they can beef up that offensive line and go blocking when they put tight ends on the field. They just, I think that there's good players here. I just don't think there's elite players here. It's kind of a little bit about how I feel about the Texans receiving group, but I still think Brandon Cooks, even though, I said he's a number 2 who's been playing number 1 his whole career, I think Brandon Cooks is still better than DJ Chark. I like DJ Chark too, but he's still kind of a number 2, maybe number 3 guy who's been stuck playing at number 1 in Jacksonville. It would have been, I hate that it keeps happening to this guy, and I feel really bad. But wouldn't it have been really fun if, Allen Robinson just stuck it out with this team, and Allen Robinson was leading this group?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I think almost anything would be better than him stuck in Chicago.
Yeah. So I think it's a solid group. Like you said, there's so many good wide receiver groups. You look at it and you're like, well, they have 3 guys who can all make plays. It's just, so how are they tier 4? But at the same time, when you don't have elite options, that's when you start to go down the pecking order.
Yeah, so I agree. And then for the offensive line to now round up the offense for Jacksonville. So the interior is very good. You have Andrew Norwell and AJ Kane for guard, and you have Brandon Linder for center. That's all very good. It's the tackle that's an issue. Cam Robinson, Jawan Taylor, guys who were hyped up prior to the draft and then kind of have really struggled to, live up to that hype. They did also get Walker Little in the second round. So the tackle is the issue. So they're tier 4, but at least they have the interior. And maybe if Walker Little is good and Cam Robinson or Jawan Taylor take a step up, maybe you can turn that into get some extra wins there. But for now, tier 4.
Yeah, Robinson kind of saved himself from kind of getting bounced in the league a little bit last season because he was solid enough. He wasn't great, but he was solid enough. So that helped them. And yeah, I mean, I do think Walker's the big one because before this past season, he was kind of viewed in that tier. He wasn't viewed as a Sewell tier. He was kind of viewed in that Darisaw, Vera Tucker, and who's the last guy I was thinking? Rashawn Slater tier. He was kind of viewed in that tier. He just hasn't been healthy. He hasn't been on the field enough to kind of earn the opportunity to get drafted that high because he was viewed as a first-round talent up until basically he stopped playing the last 2 years because he was hurt and everything started happening. So if he starts to find that talent that made him such a highly rated prospect, I mean, and you add him to this interior line, like you were saying, this could be a really good tight end or offensive line group.
Yeah. So for now, there's some stuff to like about the offense. It could grow as the season goes on, but for now, it is the 28th rated offense in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an upside play when I talk about I like this offense. I still am very high on Lawrence. I think he's going to have a good rookie year. And I think a lot of this stuff's going to work out. I think that, they're going to be able to run the ball well with that interior offensive line. I think that even though there's no elite players in their receiving group, they still have good playmakers in that receiving group. And I think that they're going to be able to make some plays with this team. And how many – Tim Tebow, over 1.5 catches this season. Are you taking over or under?
I'll say over.
2 catches for Tim Tebow this season. All right.
Well, I guess maybe it's interesting because I'm not sure if how much he'll get receiving. So I think I'll say over 4.5 snaps.
Okay. That's interesting. I mean, it remains to be seen if he's going to even make the roster, but I guess you never count out him.
Right, exactly. So moving on to the defense. How did I forget talking about him and the tight end? Again, we talk about tight ends. There you go. There's your tight end option. Move on to defense. Coverage, lot in the secondary. You got a lot of young guys. You got a lot of young, talented guys, but young. It's Shaquille Griffin isn't so much young. They paid him some money. He should be a good option. And you also have CJ Henderson, who they just drafted. I'm high on. I know he wasn't amazing last year, but he had his moments, and I think he'll be better in his second year, as we've seen with corners. I'm a big fan of Tyson Campbell, their second-round pick, who probably won't be great his first year because he's a rookie, but you don't need him to be great right away. They also have Trey Herndon, who's entering his 4th year. He's fine, whatever. For their safeties, Andrew Wigard, and then they drafted Andre Sisco, a guy who we were both high on in the 3rd round. And then for the linebackers, Miles Jack and Joe Schobert, who are both very good linebackers as well. It's a tier 3 coverage unit. And again, this is something I could see turning into like a tier 1 coverage unit if everyone develops the way that we hope they could.
Yeah, Griffin's solid. Henderson's getting there. Like you said, it takes a little bit of time, but you liked a lot. I mean, of the first-round corners last season, I'm trying to think. He's probably the one we like the most after just the rookie season. And, there's rookie season struggles, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so you liked a lot what you saw there. And, the thing is that it's pretty impressive that this is even a tier 3 group because it's like this was a group that was basically, they basically killed this group to try and get Trevor Lawrence, to tank to get Trevor Lawrence. They sold out. Mm-hmm. They sold off basically the entire defense besides Miles Jack, which Miles Jack's terrific. I like Miles Jack. He's an incredible athlete at linebacker, but they sold out on so much to get Lawrence. The fact that they've been able to rebuild this, that it's a competitive coverage group, I think is impressive. And I like a lot of these pieces here. I think Henderson, like you said, can be very good. I think Campbell, even if he ends up as just like that 3rd corner, can be pretty good there. I like Griffin's game. And like you said, Schobert and Jack are awesome.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Part of it is, there's potential here. And I guess there is a bit of a question mark. It could be worse if the young guys don't take that step up, but I think they will. So that's what I'm saying there. Also for their front seven now, with the run defense and pass rush. Again, we talked about their linebackers. The edge, Josh Allen, who I was kind of hoping would turn into like an elite guy this last year. It didn't quite work out that way, but he's still good. Kayvon Chason is another guy who he was a rookie last year and didn't show much, which was unfortunate. So hopefully he can turn it around and play well. You also have Jihad Ward for to round out the edge group, and then interior Devon Hamilton, Tavin Byron, and Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown, the best of the three there. So run defense and pass rush actually are both still tier 5. So this is the team built on the coverage, which is not the worst thing to do. It certainly isn't, but still 26th rated defense. They also have Josh Lambo, who I gave a tier 3 kicker, but now that I'm thinking about it, probably should have been higher than that. So maybe a mistake there, but I'll think about that off maybe after this podcast. So as a whole, 28th in the NFL, 4.62 wins. But I agree with you. It could be an exciting 4 to 5 win season.
Yeah, I just think that the problem is that I think Josh Allen struggled because he was asked to do too much for the defense. He's not playing with a lot of really good players around him, particularly on the defensive line and in the pass rush group. So not having like a workable second option next to him, I just think made it way too hard on him. And the problem is that I still don't really see a second option next to him that I really like. So like you said, Malcolm Brown might be the best player on this defensive line, which says a lot about a team. If Malcolm Brown's the best player in your defensive line, I think he's solid, but I don't think he's spectacular. And then, another upside player, Jay Tufele, another guy who a lot of people were really high on. I think at one point before last season, I think he was viewed as like a top 10 prospect. And then he opted out and he opted out. We didn't see him for 12 months. And then we started picking at his junior year tape. So perhaps this is a guy who comes on and starts to show his stuff. This has got to be the weirdest year to evaluate talent, I think, for rookies too, because having these guys we basically haven't seen for 12 months. So it's really weird to see it with all this stuff going on. But I do think he is another upside guy that they can add to this team.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting stuff there. All right, ready to go to number 2? Team number 2?
Yeah. So this is where the division gets interesting, right? So so we're gonna go here. I'm just gonna do it because I feel pretty convicted about this one. I was high on this team last season, and I think given the situation of Andrew Luck retiring and still building this team, this is maybe outside the Cleveland Browns the best roster construction that we've seen over the last few seasons. They've just done a really good job of building a really complete team, and honestly, I think they're the most complete team in this division. That being said, I'm going with the Indianapolis Colts here because I think that the Titans have elite players at certain positions and they don't. And I think that's going to hurt them slightly compared to the Titans. But I still think it's going to be a very good team and very competitive. And the wild card here is, as we're going to talk about, Carson Wentz and what Wentz we're getting here. I have the Colts at number 2.
Okay. So I have another concern about the Colts that seems like maybe you don't find as concerning. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, let's start off with what you just said. Well, first, Frank Reich. He was a top 10 coach in the coaching rankings, so that's where he's at. But really, where it gets interesting is Carson Wentz, who I had as a tier 3 quarterback. I think some people would have had as a tier 4, maybe even some as a tier 5. I have as tier 3, and there is even potential for him to become a tier 2. And in fact, this is a guy who's been a tier 5 and a tier 1 quarterback throughout the course of his career, and he hasn't been in the league that long. So he is maybe the biggest wild card in football right now of how well Carson Wentz plays. Could really change a lot in the NFL.
Yeah, and the big thing about this is he's back with Frank Reich. This is what we talked about, is how, does this actually change things? And, there was a lot you didn't like about Carson Wentz last season, but he's also in a situation that I think is better for him because while I don't think the receivers, he had bad receivers in Philadelphia, so maybe by default it's a little bit better. It's still not a great receiving room.
Hard to get a lot worse.
Yeah, it's playing behind a much better offensive line. He's not going to have to hang on to the ball and make so many make these long decisions that kind of were his demise last season. So maybe that helps, and maybe they do things to help cater to his game. But at the same time, you can't grade him. I think best case scenario right now is you can grade him as a tier 3, and maybe he gets back to tier 2 and tier 1. It just seems really tough to watch after last season.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a unique scenario. You also have for the halfbacks, Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, and Naheem Hines. This is a good running back room. This is a tier 2 running back room, and it was 7th overall, only a couple spots away from tier 1. And Jonathan Taylor, he could end up being one of those guys. I think when I made my top 10, I made a top 10 running back list. I think I had him at number 11. I wanted to have him at 10, but I just couldn't quite get there. But I mean, he's right there.
He was a guy who in college looked so explosive that early on in the season, you're kind of like, oh, well, this isn't as exciting. But he just kept, I think he ended up like 3rd in rushing last year, right? 3rd or 2nd? Yeah.
I think he had like a 200-yard game against Jacksonville week 17, which helped with that. But yeah, he kept improving as the year went on.
Yeah. Yeah. So it looked underwhelming at first, but yeah, like you said, he was just very steady last season. And I think he can continue to be that where, and then, he has the potential to still be an explosive player. We saw it in college, and I think it can still translate to the NFL. He's big, he's fast, he can make people miss. I think he's a really good running back, and I'm a huge Nyheim Hines fan. I mean, this guy, just as a receiving back, I know he's not going to be a star running back or anything like that, but this guy makes incredible catches. He might be one of the most talented receiving backs I've seen, just in terms of catch ability. He makes some really difficult catches, he runs good routes, and he's really quick.
Right. And don't forget about Marlon Mack, a guy with, he's had an 1,000-yard season in 2019. So they got guys that can fill roles. If they get hurt, other guys can jump in. So very good running back room. Let's talk about the worst part about this team. It's the wide receiver room, in my opinion. This is the part that I sort of talked about earlier. If you talk about a construction of a team, well, I think they should have done something to improve this wide receiving room. I think they should have signed a guy, and they don't like to sign guys. That's just what they do. I don't like it. It is what it is. You have T.Y. Hilton, who, didn't have his best season last year and isn't getting any younger. Michael Pittman, who showed moments as a rookie. There's hope there with Pittman to at least be like a number 2 guy.
Yeah.
But, Paris Campbell, maybe what they're hoping for. He's been a 2nd rounder in 2019, but he struggled to stay healthy. You also have Zach Pascal, whatever. And then Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox, good tight end grouping. But this is a tier 5 running back, or excuse me, a tier 5 receiving room for me. We talk about how much talent there is. And you sort of brought this up with edge rushers. I kind of feel like with how many good receivers there are, you have to have some good receivers. And there's a lot of question marks here. And their best guys are guys with still significant question marks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think the hope for the Colts is one of Paris Campbell or Michael Pittman kind of make the leap into, I don't know if they have tier 1 ability or like elite ability, but you at least hope one of those guys become like that kind of dependable range where it's like, I'm trying to think of a good comparison, but that they
like
can
a Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, essentially that range. I think that they have the capabilities of hitting that range. You hope that they can hit that level. I guess my one counter, I mean, I am worried about this group. That's why one of the reasons I have them below Tennessee. And I am a little concerned about this group. I think the one counter to it I have, while they weren't a great passing team last season, they still kind of just pieced it together to make it work. Jack Doyle can come up with a catch. Mo Alley Cox can come up with a catch. I think Campbell, Pittman, and Hilton can all come up and make a play when they really need it. Even Pascal is a guy who came up with a couple plays last season. I think that they can kind of make it to work and patch it together. That being said, when you're talking about teams who are potentially winning the division and competing for a Super Bowl, you don't want to say, oh, my receivers can patch it together and make it work. You want to have a guy that you really depend on. And I think that's where the concern is.
Right. I mean, a lot of that is Frank Reich and what he can do with an offense. But I think it's like what you said. What I've said about Baltimore last year was, they don't have good receivers, but, they don't need good receivers. And I think I was wrong in that because you clearly saw how teams, when they were able to, cover the Baltimore receivers, they weren't able to do much. And at some point, especially in the playoffs, if you're going to go up against a defense that knows when to switch, that they know how to play defense. They're not going to get fooled by Frank Reich's concepts. And you're going to have a receiver who can make a play. And the way I'm looking at their team right now on paper, I don't think they have that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think this is one of the 2 biggest concerns with the Colts. And it's something that, I don't know, because it's not like you can say, oh, maybe they make a move at the trade deadline, because that's not really what they do. Maybe they figure something out with this, or like I said, maybe a guy like Campbell or Pittman hits that level, but you're just hoping something works out for that.
Yeah. The bright side, offensive line, very good. The one question is, you have Eric Fisher, who's been injured. Who knows when he'll come back? I think they're saying they hope he's back at least for playoffs. But, you have Braden Smith, as your other tackle, and Sam Tevy, who was not very good with the Chargers. I'm not sure if that's really the way you want to go, of having him as a starting left tackle for a good chunk of the year. But the rest of the offensive line, very good. Obviously, Quentin Nelson is incredible. You have Mark Glanowski and Ryan Kelly as the center. So it's a tier 1 offensive line. It's a very good offensive line, even with the question mark at tackle. Everything else is great. And at some point, you expect Eric Fisher to come back and play. So I still have it as a tier 1.
Yeah, I mean, this offensive line is terrific. It's the best part of this offense easily. And yeah, I mean, it makes the running back room work. It makes it look really good too. Taylor's going to run behind this group a whole lot. And I think that they're not going to ask Carson Wentz to do too much. Like, they're not going to put him in a lot of high pressure situations early on. Now, maybe if he starts to show, 2018 Carson Wentz or whatever it was, then all of a sudden you start to take a little more risk and maybe one of these receiver works out. And then all of a sudden this is a really dynamic offense. But I think this is going to be, a steady running game. This is going to be their approach throughout the early part of the season.
Yeah, the running game should be good. I guess just the question mark is, will their passing game be enough to really take advantage of it? The team like Tennessee, which we'll get to, their running game is awesome, but they also didn't have a great passing game on top of it. The question is going to be there. So the offense, 20th, according to my rankings. So not horrible, but if they can get the passing game to work, that's how it could jump up to potentially top 10.
Yeah. No, I think it could be an interesting group, but yeah, I mean, this is definitely the reason why the Colts maybe are below the Titans, because there's still some questions in this group.
Yeah, and we'll go over to defense now. Defense, very good. You have your coverage unit. You have Rocky Sin, who, he's young. He's fine. I guess he's solid. You have Xavier Rhodes, who kind of had a resurgence last year with how good he was. When everyone kind of thought he was washed. Kenny Moore, the second as well, another very good corner. So with Rocky Sin, probably the third guy there. You also have Darius Leonard, maybe the best, at least one of the best coverage linebackers in the league, along with Bobby Okereke, who is mostly a coverage linebacker. And for the safeties, Julian Blackman and Kari Willis. This is a good coverage unit. I'm going to have it as a tier 2 coverage unit.
Yeah. I mean, I liked a lot of this group. I think the second corner spot is the biggest question, because shout out to Kenny Moore, Valdosta State. One more time for that. I think Kenny Moore is top. It's so hard to put like rankings for these, because it's like the way they use big nickels now. They're basically just glorified slot corners in some capacity. I just think, I think he's in like a top 3 or 4 slot corners in the league, though. I think he's in that conversation. I think he's awesome in that group. And I think this is a really good defense. I think the coverage unit is, talking about building the coverage unit and building from that group. This is kind of what they've done.
Yeah, I agree. And moving on to their front 7, you have DeForest Buckner, who's awesome. Grover Stewart, who's not awesome, but he's fine. No disrespect to Grover Stewart, but I mean, you're next to DeForest Buckner. What do you want from me? Kwity Paye, their first rounder, who I'm a big fan of, along with Triquan Willis at their edge. And then I already talked about the linebackers. So run defense should still be great. I have it as a top 5 run defense, which is tier 1. Pass rush, not quite as good, but still it's a tier 3 pass rush for me. I think that Kwity Paye is good. And DeForest Buckner, of course, what he can do from the inside. Also, kicker 3 tier with Rodrigo Blankenship. So that puts their defense as a whole 8th best defense with the 20th best offense. This is a 9.05 win team, which is 16th in the league, which is 8th in the AFC. So I have them as the best team not making the playoffs in the AFC. But that could easily change if Carson Wentz plays well, or if the receiving room is able to, at least get opens with some consistency.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this Colts team is the pass rush group, just because I think the defense is basically elite everywhere else, but their pass rush numbers are kind of all over the board. They don't blitz basically at all. They were the second lowest blitz team in the NFL last season, but they forced quarterbacks. They had one of the highest hurry percentages in the league last season. They forced quarterbacks to get the ball out of their hand quickly, but they're pretty average as far as like sacks, knockdowns, and pressures. So it's a very interesting how all over the board their numbers are. They're asking a lot of young guys, specifically Kwity Paye, to come in and make an impact. But I mean, they have an elite player in that group. That's DeForest Buckner. I've said I think he's awesome, and I think he's a terrific talent.
Yeah, and it makes everything easier. When you have that guy, you don't need Kwity Paye to come in and be elite. You just need him to come in and do his role, which I think, I hope he could do. But again, there always is that question mark with rookies. So that's where things get interesting. Any final thoughts on the Colts?
No, I think we just about covered it, everything with there. We can move on to the number one team here, which, if you're, I'm sure you all figured it out by now. This is the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, as I said, I think that there are some questions about this Titans defense. I'm not convinced it's just going to turn around and be awesome. I think they can be solid next season. I don't know how good it's going to be, but I think it's good enough because I think that this is the best offense in the league right now. I think that if you're going to go through this list, this is going to be a lot of tier 2s and tier 1s. I think that they have an elite quarterback, an elite running back, an elite wide receiver room. I think all of that put together means this team's going to be really fun to watch, and I think that they're terrific at what they do. I'm not overly worried about Arthur Smith leaving because I think there's enough talent here that whoever's coming in and just taking over the system is going to do a lot of the same things. I think this is going to be a really awesome group, and I'm really excited to watch this team.
Yeah, I agree. It all starts with Mike Vrabel, who is the head coach. He was 17th on my coaching rankings, which is actually below average, but again, barely. It's literally as close to average as possible. So you lose, 1/20th of a win there, barely anything. And then we'll start off with just the two most important things about their offense: the Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry combination. They also have Darrington Evans to round out the running back room. It's not just tier 1, it's number 1 running back room because Derrick Henry is the best running back in football, and a tier 2 quarterback with Tannehill at number 7. So tier 1 running back, that's a win, 2.5 wins, and then tier 2 quarterback, I believe that's around 3 wins. So just out the bat, you're getting over 5 wins from 2 players.
Yeah, I mean, we did our whole Tannehill thing. There's a lot of people who do disagree about this, but I think he's awesome in play action. He works his team. He manages and understands his team better than a lot of quarterbacks do with their own teams. I think he's just fantastic at what he does, and he understands who he is as a quarterback. And I think that, a lot of Derrick Henry's success, or a lot of Tannehill's success can be associated with Derrick Henry, but I think equally Derrick Henry's success is attributed to Ryan Tannehill's rise too. So I think that they go hand in hand. I think the one question you have about this group is, Derrick Henry is kind of entering, especially in this modern age of running back, almost this unprecedented territory of like reps and success. We don't have a ton of guys over recent history who handle these 300 attempts per season in back-to-back years and just keep going. So is there a chance that this starts to slip up? I'm not betting against it because he's just so huge and so dominant, but there's just a thing with Derrick Henry is that, he's had 681 carries over the last 2 seasons. Does that start to weigh on him eventually?
You have to. I mean, it's certainly concerning. I mean, it's a fair concern to have. There's no running back that plays forever. Every time you're going to fall off at some point. I think that I would, like you said, I wouldn't bet against him. He's had so much success. And what's interesting about Henry is he's gotten better as he's gotten older. I mean, he's someone who, you look at his numbers, it's just every year, it's like he's adding like 400 yards to his season total, which it's part of that was just having Tannehill sort of as to take pressure off of him makes that work so well. But yeah, it's a concern. It could happen. It happens to every running back. And a lot of, Todd Gurley was an MVP candidate and fell off in the same season. So like it happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he's awesome. I mean, basically the last 3 years, he's been over 5 yards a carry. So I expect that to continue. But I mean, I do think that's the question back of everyone's head is how long can Derrick Henry keep doing this? I'm not betting against him right now. And I think, like I said, Tannehill is awesome. I'm going to stick by this. I think he's awesome on this team.
Yeah, I think it was when they had their postseason run that was unexpected when they beat New England and then they beat Baltimore. And I think it was like after the New England game, they said guys who have like this many amount of carries typically don't play well the next game. And I'm thinking, okay, probably going to not do well against Baltimore. And then he was just great again. So like he's one of those guys every now and then, like Tom Brady, you just have to never bet against. He's another one of those guys. He breaks the rules.
Yeah, exactly. And, just going off this Tannehill thing one more time. because I think this is important because people keep going off of this. It's like it's no longer a small sample size. You could say going into last season, oh, he only did it in the second half of the season. You want to see it a little bit more. It's now a season and a half of this guy is playing like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. You can deny it all you want, but the numbers say what the numbers are. He's a top 10 quarterback in the league for the last 24 games of his career, and I think that continues this next season.
Yeah, I had him as a Pro Bowler when the Pro Bowl thing came out. I don't get a vote, unfortunately, but I guess everyone does, right? The fan vote. But
Yeah.
but I said you don't get like one of those official vote things. But I said I had him as a top 3 quarterback in the AFC. Now he immediately had a bad game after that and made me look stupid, but like he was up there. He was really good. All right. Should we move on to wide receivers?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So obviously Julio Jones, that addition is huge. AJ Brown is awesome. And then, after that is where it gets kind of where else are you going to get the yards from? You have Josh Reynolds, who has, okay, I guess nothing special. Des Fitzpatrick, a 4th rounder. I always love getting mid-round wide receivers. Those guys do work out from time to time. And they also got Racey McMath, 6th rounder. So I love that. I'm always a big fan of drafting receivers because in those mid rounds, it works out. Don't draft him in the 1st round, draft him in the 3rd or 4th or 6th. And then you have Anthony Ferkster, I feel like he could do better now that he kind of will get more playing time without Jonnu Smith because he is a good receiving tight end when he's been playing. This is not a tier 1 receiving room for me. They don't have a 3rd option for me. And it was close. This was number 6 and top 5 are tier 1, but I do have this as tier 2.
Yeah, and I do like Ferkser. I think, his numbers really weren't that far off from what Jonnu Smith was other than touchdowns. Smith was kind of the red zone guy. Smith had 41 catches to Ferkser's 39. Smith had 448 yards for 10.9 yards a catch. Ferkser 387 for 9.9. So I think that's I think the tight end's going to be fine. I think that they have a lot of really good receiving, or I think, obviously, it's the top 2 guys who are the elite guys. That's what makes this one special. I think Josh Reynolds is fine. And the other one, too, speaking of tight ends, is an interesting one. Jared Pinkey, too, is a rookie. I know rookie tight ends kind of take a little bit, but he also had some pretty good pass-catching chops in college. So that's another guy who could make an impact.
Okay, interesting stuff there. Offensive line to round it out. Unfortunately, no Isaiah Wilson this year, so that loss will be huge. But, Taylor Lewan, a big thing, what's crazy is how good their offense was last year. They did it without Taylor Lewan for most of it. He got hurt early on. So, he's a top 10 tackle in the league. He's really good. They drafted Dylan Raduns, who he's someone who is one of the biggest wild cards in the draft just because he was really good in college, but he was in that Division I AA North Dakota State. So what's going on there? How well will he handle better talent? He did do well in the Senior Bowl, so that's promising. He also interior Roger Saffold and then Nate Davis and Ben Jones, all very solid interior guys. This is a tier 2 offensive line. The only reason why it's not tier 1 is just simply that a rookie tackle it's a question mark. If Raduns can play very well, this could easily end up being a tier 1 offensive line. That's good.
Yeah, he's not quite as a wild card as that Wisconsin Whitewater guy whose film that they showed was basically him carrying logs, but he is pretty much a wild card outside of that group. I think there was flashes if you looked at his tape that it's like, okay, this guy's a monster and he has the size for it. It's just too hard to tell. And, at the end of the day, I think some of the offensive tackle stuff can be kind of like, we'll see what happens. We had 5 offensive tackles the year before in the 1st round, and it is like, okay, a couple of them are pretty good, and then there's Isaiah Wilson and Andrew Thomas too. So maybe because he's not from Georgia, then that works out because it clears that Georgia's offensive tackles were a problem last season.
That must be it. I think it's directly correlated. So you talked about this offense being the best in the league. It is the best in the league according to my system, adding 9.81 wins just in offense alone. This is a loaded offense.
Yeah, and the biggest question is this fine without Arthur Smith? I think we both talked about this. I think it's going to be fine. It's not like the person who's going to come in. I don't even know who their offensive coordinator is now. It's not like the guy who's coming in, though, is going to come in and reinvent the wheel. based off this team. You saw exactly what this team was successful at last season, and I think it stays pretty much the same. And I think you have guys now. I think the chemistry thing is an important thing too. You have guys now who have played with each other with AJ Brown, Derrick Henry, and Tannehill for a number of years, and I think that chemistry is important too to running this offense.
How could you not realize that the great Todd Downing is the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans?
My bad. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Todd. Todd.
I'm looking this up. I'm looking this up. He's like coached for like 7 different teams. So maybe that'll help. I don't know. All right. Sure. Well, next year next week, it'll be the Todd Downing podcast, all about Todd Downing. Until then, let's go over to the defense. Starting off with coverage, you have Janoris Jenkins, who, again, guy who's not bad, not getting any younger though. They also Caleb Farley, who I was a huge fan of. I had him as my number 1 corner. The issue is the injuries, and also just he's a rookie corner. Rookie corners almost never play well, so I wouldn't hope for too much from him immediately, but maybe in the future. They also have Brian Borders, who didn't play a ton for Jacksonville, but actually looked competent when he did. The safety room, Kevin Byard, Armani Hooker, and then they drafted Elijah Molden, another guy who made my top 10 defensive backs. So he was in the 3rd round. I think that's a good addition there. And for linebackers, Rashad Evans and Jaylen Brown can both kind of do it all. So it's not a great coverage unit. The secondary is the cornerback position is really concerning for me because they might need Caleb Farley to be one of those guys who jumps in and immediately has success, which I would never bank on. It's a tier 4 coverage unit for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's tough because it's tough to tell because it's all basically young guys and Janoris Jenkins. And I like some of Jenkins's game, but at the same time, I don't want Jenkins as my number 1 guy. Right. And I think that's where this team has the problem is they're going to ask him early on to lead this group and be that number 1 guy. The whole Adoree Jackson thing was weird, right? I didn't really understand what happened there and how that soured and then moving on in the course. But obviously, this would have been a lot better if he was healthy and on this team. So moving on from him and then not really having the replacement in place, I think that makes this a really tough group to evaluate. Maybe a couple of these guys work out because they have so many young guys, but it's just tough to grade this one, especially at the cornerback position, which I just think is so important to have at least competent guys out there at corner nowadays in today's game.
Yeah, I really think the move is for this defense to play 2 safeties deep and let teams run on you. I mean, I think that's the move for a lot of teams, but I really think for a team like this that you don't have the best corner depth. Don't put them in positions to fail. They played a lot of cover 3 last year, which I think was just a mistake. But again, and I get it. You don't want to let teams just run all over you, but sometimes you got to do that. Speaking of the run defense, you have Jeffrey Simmons, who's very good. Dino Autry, who's solid. They added Bud Dupree, who I like a lot. I think Bud Dupree he'll probably be more impactful in the passing game, but he can stop the run to some degree. And Harold Landry as their edge. Already talked about their linebackers. So their run defense ends up being tier 3. Their pass rush is tier 4. So this isn't an incredible front 7, but there's some stuff to like here. Yeah,
I mean, they're solid pieces. I like Landry. I'm interested in Dupree because I liked his game, but at the same time, I didn't know if I wanted to pay him was the problem. I don't know if I wanted to pay him that much. That was the biggest question I had. But I like part of his game, and now he's going to step in. The biggest thing is he's going to step into a point where he's the number 1 pass rushing option. And can he be that guy where there's 18 pass rushing options with the Steelers while he was there, which obviously helped. I mean, I think kind of like what you said when you're talking about the coverage group, I think it's a solid run defense, but you're going to ask them to do a lot with basically no help. Because like you said, they're going to have to – you have Kevin Byard, which helps, but you're going to have to keep these safeties up top and over the top of the defense because you can't let these corners get burnt. So this run defense is going to have virtually nobody behind them to help them out, and they have to make stops because otherwise teams are just going to be able to control the clock on them and keep this offense off the field.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, I'm fine with that. If you want to turn this into an 8-possession game, okay, we'll still outscore you into 8 possessions because you'll score less than you would, per drive than you would if you were throwing the ball deep. That's just the way I view it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the offense is good enough to do it, and that's why they're the number 1 team in this division. Just, when you start to pick apart some of the positions, that's the thing you think about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. the worst part about the Titans for the past like 7 years has been kicking. It's not getting any better. The two kickers on their roster are Blake Howbeal. I'm not sure how you say that. They also have Tucker McCann. These are two guys. One was an undrafted free agent this year, one last year. Neither with any playing time. This I don't know why they continue to neglect the kicker position, but it's obviously tier 5 here.
Yeah, and it's, one of these days people are going to catch up to this, right? That having kickers is actually important and how many points they add to your team if it's good. I don't know. Like when your kicker can consistently hit like 50 yards and in, like the ball. I mean, listen, the Baltimore Ravens are competitive because if they get to midfield, they might get 3 points. They're probably getting 3 points out of it. If they get to the 40-yard line, they'll probably get 3 points out of it. And that keeps them really competitive because it makes it a lot easier on your team and your offense. I think this offense is terrific, but it's got to score a lot of points because we don't know about this kicking group. Sooner or later, the rest of the league is going to figure this out.
Yeah, I stand by in that Buffalo Baltimore game. If Justin Tucker played like typical Justin Tucker and made those 2 field goals instead of missed it, I think there's a real chance Baltimore wins that game. Because remember, then they would have been down 1. When Lamar throws that pick 6, he probably doesn't force it. They take the lead. There's a real chance Baltimore wins if Justin Tucker plays like Justin Tucker. That's one example. But yeah, kickers matter.
Yeah, I don't know. It blows my mind that we don't have 32 good kickers in football. Like, honestly, I don't understand I just don't understand how we can't find 32 people to kick the ball.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? I still think maybe I could be a good kicker someday. That's still one of those things in my head. I'm like, you know what? Maybe in a couple of years I'll end up being on the NFL team as a kicker.
I think it's a little harder than that, but at the same time, I do feel like that we should have enough talent that it's like, oh yeah, I can hit a field goal. I know people in high school hitting 40-yard field goals. How is there not a way for these guys to just, get to the NFL? How is there not enough of these guys?
It must be the mental thing. I went in Boy Scouts. I was someone that was in my troop. He could kick like over 60-yard field goals. Like in practice. It's in practice, but it's like he's just a guy who I knew who could do that. Like he wasn't like anything special. He never had a chance to make the NFL or anything. It must just be between the ears.
I think it 100% is. Everything about kicking is psychological. It's not based on talent, because you looked at who was the guy? Younghoe Koo. Younghoe Koo, when he entered the league, he had a lot of pressure on him in Los Angeles as this, I think he's, I don't want to botch it because I don't want to say what ethnicity he is and have it wrong, but he was like one of the first guys from his country to be a kicker in the league or be a football player in the league. He had all this pressure on him. Everyone was excited to watch him play, and he struggled in Los Angeles because of it. He got away from the league. He comes back, and all of a sudden he's one of the best kickers in the league in Atlanta.
Yeah. That's I think a better example too from the negative could be the Blair Walsh thing. Right? Yes. This great kicker misses the one, and then just broke. It happens. So, for the Titans, they end up with, defense 23rd, nothing crazy, and obviously no points for the kicker. So they only added about a 1.5. If you take away their offense, it's only a 1.5 with everything else combined. That still puts them at an 11.31 win team, 5th in the NFL. I believe that's 3rd in the AFC. This is a team that is a very good team, even if it's all just one phase of the game for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like this team, they basically need to just get like the 20th best defense out of this defense, right? Then I think that they're in the conversation for winning the AFC. I mean, honestly, because I think this offense is special enough to do it. I think that they just need to get competent enough defense. They just need to get, they can't have bad defense, I guess is my thing. They just have to have good enough.
Yeah, well, let's say if Caleb Farley comes out and he plays like he lives up to his potential right away, is like an elite corner, right? Let's just say he becomes Jair Alexander immediately, right? Which probably won't happen. But if that were to happen, does that put this team all like immediately in Super Bowl contender? I think it does.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think they necessarily need that. Like, I think the roadmap for this team winning a Super Bowl is kind of like the 2009 Saints. A really good offense.
Injure people?
Well,
kill Brett Favre.
Yeah. A really good offense.
Look out.
Yeah. A really talented offense, though, that scores a bunch of points and can do a bunch of things. And then a defense that, it might not be a good defense, but what they could do is just create some turnovers and give their offense more possessions. I think that's kind of the roadmap for this team to winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah. I don't think it's – and again, when you get to that point, if you can just they've been in an AFC championship game before. If you can get back there, All you have to do is, win that game. You're in the Super Bowl, and Super Bowls feels like anything can happen. Yeah, I have them as the third best team in the AFC. Obviously, we talked about the first two with the Browns and the Chiefs. Hey, maybe do well, and you could potentially get some wins. Maybe you get the number 1 seed. If they could do that, look out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very interesting team to watch going forward because I do think that at least one side of the ball, they're as elite as anybody else in the league. So I think that this team, anything's possible when you get to the playoffs. We saw this team as a 9-7 team make the AFC Championship game because of this offense and the way they were able to control the game. And I think they can just continue to do that.
Yeah, and even that 9-7 team, it was a bit misleading because like the first half of the season, they were with Marcus Mariota and they were like 4-4.
Yeah, didn't they win like 7 in a row at the end of the season or something like that heading into the playoffs?
I'm not sure if it was that much. They were very, once they switched to Tannehill, it was a completely different team.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically, they can continue to do that. They've looked like a high-level team basically since Tannehill took over. And, we talk a little bit, it almost becomes cliche when you say a quarterback changes the complexion of a franchise. Ryan Tannehill changes the entire complexion of this franchise. Everything's been different since he's took over, and that speaks a lot to what this team can be.
Yeah, it's kind of almost annoying because, all of the hot take talking heads, or even the people you just talk to in a bar, will all be like, "Oh no, it's all about the quarterback," and you want to be like, "Oh no, actually, focus on the offensive line, focus on the second." The quarterback matters a lot. That's a big deal in football.
Yeah, and it is. There's nothing else really to say about it. Tannehill has been so important for this team, and I think it'll be interesting to see. I feel like it almost, when I say it, sometimes it's like, am I going like John Clayton, Joe Flacco's elite category when saying Ryan Tannehill's elite? But the numbers keep backing up that this guy's an elite quarterback. It's really hard to say, no, he's not, because I think he's the top 7 guy in the league, and he's played at least top 10 the last season and a half.
I think it depends on, I wouldn't consider top 7 elite.
That's fair. I guess tier 2, yeah, because you have him tier 2, and I think if you factor top 5's tier 1, then he's probably the top of tier 2 at least.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Though he's one step below. He's very, very good. Okay, so that's it for the AFC South. This was a fun one, and next week will be another fun one. We're going to talk about your team and the 3 teams trying to not let you get into the playoffs next year with the AFC East. I think that could be a very fun one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competitive division. I think that there's, 3 teams in the Jets, so it'll be interesting to see what those 3 teams do. And there'll also be the Jets, so that's always entertaining. So yeah, fun division that we're talking about next week. We'll be back to Sunday at 5 o'clock. Make sure to tune in for that.
Yes, back Sunday again. Sorry for everyone for this bouncing around schedule, but hey, you get it a week or a day early. You can, if you're expecting it on Sunday, you can still watch it after the fact or anything. And of course, if you want to listen to it, if you just like to listen to podcasts instead of watching them on YouTube, you can check that out. It's On the Sideline podcast. Or if you search On the Sideline on anywhere you get your podcast, you can get it. Kyle, let us know. Let him see that. Don't know why I'm struggling talking here at the end. It's been over an hour struggling to talk. Kyle, let them know where they can find us.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That's at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to subscribe to his channel below. Also like this video just because we want to be liked. Make sure to follow me. Yeah. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin on Twitter. That's GRONDIN by Kyle Gronin on Twitter. And then make sure once again to follow the account page. That's at On the Sideline JK on Twitter, at On the Sideline JK on Twitter to make sure any show updates.
Yes. And hopefully by then we will be talking about the Lightning back-to-back Stanley Cup champions.
We will, because they play tomorrow, right? Yeah, it's over.
Monday.
So yeah, it's over. So congrats to the Lightning, by the way, in advance.
Yeah, I feel like you're trying to jinx it.
When has the team ever come back down 3-0 except for playing Boston Bruins? So none. So yeah,
a couple times.
Yeah,
2014.
Oh yeah, it did happen again, didn't it? Mm-hmm, it doesn't matter. It's over.
All right. Well, I've learned my lesson. I never say it's over until it's over because bad juju. Not Juju Smith-Schuster.
That's kind of bad juju too.
All right. Well, we'll end it with it. Everyone, thanks again for watching. We do appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.